Bienvenidos sean todos ustedes a este episodio sensacional de The Stream, donde tenemos distintos invitados. Welcome everybody to this very special episode of The Stream, where we have as guests people that we respect, people that we care a lot about the writing that they are doing in different mediums, and we are really delighted to introduce the guests that we have at this very moment. And well, the first one that we have, they are coming all the way from the north, from our friendly neighbor Canada, and we have Zac Thompson. How are you doing, Zac?
I'm doing very good. Thank you for having me.
It's a real pleasure having you in here. But don't worry, he's not the only one that we have in here, because usually they come as the Twinkies, two in a package. We have also Lonnie Nadler. How are you doing, Lonnie?
I'm good. I'm feeling like a Twinkie right now.
Hopefully that won't be used because of the weather. That's something that we had in the pre-show. We were talking about that. And well, of course, you know the rest of our Moti Club. In order of seniority, we have in here Gilberto alias Nightboy. How are you doing?
Me estás diciendo viejo maldito.
Yes.
I was telling you to call me old. Yeah. Okay. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us tonight. This is gonna be awesome. This is gonna be out of the normal. Trust me.
All right, and also we have Daniel Villamil, also known as El Wookie. How are you doing?
Hi.
Okay, that was really brief. Okay.
Yeah.
Don't worry, he doesn't bite and we don't bite. Okay, so the reason that we're having this show is, well, because we have the pleasure of having our special guest, Zac and Lonnie, and they have been present with different titles, mostly on the independent realm, but they have also worked with the main comic book publishers, and right now they are in charge of one of the series that it's actually changing the stage for some of the most beloved characters right now that are in the Marvel Universe in this case, and we are speaking, of course, of the X-Men. So we want to talk about this particular series that right now we are having. It began with Age of X-Men, but that's actually not the beginning of the story. Lonnie, we start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about the Age of X-Men? Something, obviously, please don't reveal the ending because we're looking forward for it. But can you tell us about the inspiration for this different reality for the X-Men?
Yeah, so the Age of X-Men, it started with that Alpha issue, but really it began with the relaunch of Uncanny X-Men, which was written by Ed Brisson, Kelly Thompson, and Matthew Rosenberg. And it was sort of this big, crazy, sprawling X-Men event in which Nate Gray, X-Man, was sort of went a little bit crazy and sort of took over, and all the X-Men were fighting him as he was doing his best to make things better for them. And so Age of X-Men sort of picks up where that series left off, and it sees all of the X-Men who were part of that, or most of them, having been displaced into a strange, perfect, sort of very utopian world where everything for once seems sort of good for the X-Men. And then there's obviously some, dark and dreamy undertones there that will uncover as the series goes on. But for now, things are good for them.
All right, so we actually have seen some of the development in the different teams that we have in here, because we have, of course, the main series, but we also have different aspects of this reality. Zac, can you tell us a little bit about the different characters that we have in this universe?
Yeah, so I mean, we have on the Marvelous X-Men, I'll probably need help here because I always forget one person. Magneto, X-Man, Nature Girl, Storm, Jean Grey, Nightcrawler, and Colossus. And it's like a mainstay, like powerhouse team. They're kind of like in this world, more so dedicated to being like first responders rather than the typical sort of like superhero team that fights an enemy, because all the villains are dead in the Age of X-Men. There's no one left. Then on top of that, we have Next Gen, which is a team of students at the Summers Institute for Higher Learning. Follows Armor, Glob, Anole, and Rockslide as they navigate being students in like a sort of Harry Potter-esque version of the X-Men school, where they go for 10 years and pick a major. It's a very different type of school than we're used to. Then we have the amazing Nightcrawler, which is a book about Nightcrawler being the most famous mutant in the world. Issue 1 came out today, and it's all about him being a crazy, cool movie star, kind of like James Dean if he was a mutant. After that, we have the Extremists, which are the secret police of this world. That is a team comprised of Psylocke, North Star, Blob, Iceman, and Moneta, who is a new character. You can see Moneta's first appearance in Age of X-Men Alpha. Does some real cool stuff. Then after that, we have, I think in order of release, it is Prisoner X, which is a book about the jail of this world that features Bishop, Polaris, Honey Badger, Beast, and Danny Moonstar. And that's a weird book about where people go when they're erased from this perfect world. And then finally, we have probably the craziest thing we've ever tried and got pushed through, Apocalypse and the Extracts, which is Apocalypse being a love guru in the 1960s sort of world of Age of X-Men, where the only thing he wants is free love. And Kitty Pryde and iBoy and Genesis and a new character called Unveil are along for the ride.
All right, and that's a very interesting take. We're going to go with some of the questions of with the rest of the crew. But before that, I want to ask you, or perhaps to comment a little bit, because it's not the first time that you are tackling this character, Apocalypse, because it all began with the Generation series that appeared in the series of one-shots of the X-Men Black. So were you planning this way to show Apocalypse? Because we can say that you are working a different angle from this series. We go first with you, Zac, and then with Lonnie.
Sure. So with Degeneration, we were kind of given this task that we wanted to tell a full kind of contained Apocalypse story. And we knew enough about Apocalypse because we just had finished writing Cable. And we're kind of like, oh, great, we're getting thrown all the big dumb characters that can do anything in the world. What do you do with them to make them interesting? And so for that caused us to look at Apocalypse as a character and look at how to deconstruct him, look at what elements had kind of people relied on too long, and that character had relied on too long, and figured out ways to kind of push him into a new place. Those projects were pretty separate, but when it came to Age of X-Men, we already had that sort of in our mind, and there was a lot of talk about what role Apocalypse was going to play in a perfect world. And I'll let Lonnie speak a little bit more too, like what went into that sort of mindset, but it was a weird road.
Yeah, it was definitely strange. We wanted Apocalypse, because Age of X-Men has sort of been marketed, and Zac and I built it to be this spiritual successor to Age of Apocalypse. We wanted it to have links to it, but change things and give people things they wouldn't expect. And I think something Zac and I are always trying to do is stay within who characters are at their core, but also shift them. And at his core, Apocalypse is just someone who wants to, mess with the status quo and overthrow things. And in this world where things are perfect, what would that look like? And having him just be a standard villain trying to take over the world wasn't quite as interesting as making him someone spreading a message of love. And it was also this sort of weird punishment for the character that we'd come to, we'd written for a few months before that. So we just wanted to subvert expectations and see who Apocalypse could become in this new setting.
All right, so there we have it, and it's not one easy character to write, because, well, he's always been presented as one of the major menaces of the Marvel universe, but that's like really easy to try to project. Trying to add in some depth and some story, it's part of the most complicated things that you can try. We're going with Gilberto, also known as Nightboy. You have some questions prepared, right?
I have a lot of questions, and a lot of things, and you're gonna hate me, but don't do that. First, now that we are talking about Apocalypse, it seems like a very interesting form of attacking the character. from changing from an all powerful, from a powerhouse, to a guy that fears everything, that doesn't know what's surrounding him. I'm talking about the X-Men Black, all the back issues. It was part of the plan to make him fear, to make him a little bit more conscious about what other mutants may be experiencing while encountering him, or the first time that they encounter Apocalypse and they don't know what to expect, or they are going to be I don't know, killed or transformed. Something like happened with all the what's the name of all the dead, the riders of Apocalypse, or I don't know, I don't remember what it escaped to me the name. Was it that your intention?
The Horsemen of Apocalypse.
Yeah, thank you. That was your intention, to make him feel as fearful as all his subjects, rats, as you make him call them. If that was the plan, actually.
Yeah, I think part of it was with Apocalypse, because it's easy for him to say that other people are lower than him, because he's operating from this perception of privilege and absolute strength and absolute intelligence. And so when you're coming from that position of power, it's easy for you to see everyone else as lesser than. And so we wanted to put him in a place where he was experiencing life from lower and lower rungs of society, so that maybe he understood what it felt like to be on the opposite end of his power wielding. So that's sort of how we started. And yeah, I think you sort of nailed it. It was about him seeing and experiencing the Marvel universe and fighting and just life from the opposite side of the spectrum. And hopefully that might have changed him, but seems like it didn't change him very much in the end.
Well, that's quite interesting. And second, who designed the new look for Apocalypse? Because last show, the last podcast that we made, I was referring him as Apocalypse and the Chipmunks. Don't hate me. I know you only write him, but the look was all that 60 vibes. It looks like Alvin and the Chipmunks.
Yeah, that shirt. Yeah, now that you said, like, I'm not gonna be able to stop thinking about that.
I know. I did it.
I love it. That honestly, that makes me love the design even more. Though.
Yeah, exactly.
So absurd. I love it.
No, and the second part is quite interesting, but it seems we were having some questions. It seems like it's two different worlds, two different realities happening at the same time. So it's the part where all the X-Men, all the Nate Summer reality, so to call it, it's working, but not like Age of Apocalypse. Because in Age of Apocalypse, we see that everything was transformed, the whole world was transformed, and the humans were barely surviving and making the resistance at all. And this time, no. This time, what I'm appreciating, and maybe a little confusing if you are not all embedded, if you want to jump into the X-Men world with this so-called starting point, because we have Marvel starting points every 6 months, right? And yeah, so it seems so. Sorry, I'm a DC guy, so it's. But
all right, that's all the time that we have for this question, Zac.
No, but I was a big X-Men fan until Phalanx Covenant, and then they come all convulsed. But it seems that there's a reality happening at the same time, where Cyclops, Wolverine, and the rest of the mutants that weren't involved in the big fight with Apocalypse and no, it wasn't the Apocalypse. Sorry, it was Legion and Cable, X-Men. Sorry, that were fighting. They are living in parallel universe, but somewhere along the way, touching themselves. I know it's some kind of perverted, but it's like it's what's happening along the way.
Yeah, I think the big thing that we tried to do was with Age of Apocalypse, you had everything kind of put on hold, and it was this divergent history. And just by virtue of picking up on the fact that the world is kind of kept on going, you've picked up on something it's different. We've specifically designed the Age of X-Man to be a different thing. We can't really say what that is yet, because that's what the story is kind of building towards. But it's not exactly. I think when people saw it, they thought they had it all figured out, and we've barely scratched the surface.
No, it looks a little bit more complex than that.
Yeah.
And finally, well, not finally, but it came to me that there are still mutants in the Cyclops and Wolverine's reality, so to call it, and they are still going for the cure, right? Because when the part where he says that how do you call saving the world? For Cyclops, it's called Wednesday. The great line. It seems like there are still mutants. So, is it true? Well, wait, am I right? There are still mutants in Cyclops and Wolverine's reality, and so X-Men Nate candid which mutants he wanted to live in his utopia.
Yeah, there are still some mutants left in like the 616 regular Marvel universe, but like you said, there's not many that are there, and some of them sort of got left behind for one reason or another, and this is all stuff that will be answered in later issues. But it's so hard to talk about it because you're asking questions that are like super perceptive that other people haven't picked up on yet, that I don't know how to answer them without spoiling everything.
No way.
because it came to my mind. Well, it jumped more straight to me. Then the moment that Zac said that name a character, Monet, which is a new character, and I don't know why M from Generation Next came to my mind, and say, okay, M and Monet visually may be kind of similar, but the way that it's written, the personality, the character are not quite the same. So it came to my mind. So it's the same reality, it's not the same reality. Are they the same characters that we've gotten along the years? And sorry for jumping like 4 months ahead of what you're allowed to say.
I think what we can say for certain is that, this Jean Grey, this Colossus, this Nightcrawler, it is the Jean Grey, the Nightcrawler, and the Colossus from the 616. It's not like another alternate version. It's still that version, but something's happened.
So it's not Madeline Pryor, it's not Hope Summers, it's nothing like that. Okay.
Yeah.
You like them. You don't like them. Zac doesn't like them.
Yeah, they're all the normal characters, and there are reasons why they're different than them. Especially, we've played with time a little bit, and we can't really again go into detail, but there are things that happened, and we made conscious choices as storytellers to ensure that you weren't like getting to this world as they were getting to it, and you weren't getting like a huge exposition dump right away about like, here's how this was formed. We thought it would always be way more interesting to throw people into the deep end and then teach you how to swim.
Sorry, just one question. Is it my imagination, or somewhere along the way Colossus lost an arm, or it comes from a previous incarnation or reality?
He lost an arm.
You put him an arm?
Yeah, we took his...
Poor Peter.
yeah. And like we took out Magneto's eye too. And there's some horrible things that happened to both of them. There's some horrible things that happen to a lot of people. And that's kind of the cost of what this world looks like. And we wanted to really harp on that kind of thing, that, this sort of change doesn't come without a cost. And unfortunately, Peter and Eric had to carry the burden of that cost.
I'm okay with Eric's eye. But,
no, leave Eric alone. One thing that I want to mention in here is that it's interesting because usually we have Professor X as a main figure, and it's one of the characters that is missing here. However, Magneto is one of the constants, at least in the X-Men universe, for the last decade, because he has been always present. He was also present as one of the horsemen of X-Men in the prelude that we have for this story. So it's kind of interesting that the main villain is actually more present than the regular boss or the regular leader of the team. We're going to, with Daniel Villamil, with Wookie, we have also some questions from you, right?
Yes. Are you guys fan of Twilight Zone?
Oh, Tom Taylor?
The Twilight Zone.
It's a Good Life? Twilight Zone.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we love it. Yeah.
Yeah, because when I read the books, I remember a lot of that the Twilight Zone. I mean, the kid with the powers. If you are not happy, he will punish you. I feel that with these books.
Yeah, we literally talked about that like what 3-4 days ago.
Yeah. I mean that's great because like I think something that we wanted when we started this was for people to feel this sort of exactly Twilight Zone that specific mood when you're watching a Twilight Zone episode where it feels sort of dreamy and just a bit off and a bit scary, but it's never so in your face, and so it's good to know that it reminded you of that because that's something we were hoping people would get from it.
All right, we have some questions from our audience, and Wookie is going to ask you a little bit later. But Rodrigo Diaz, he's actually a huge fan of the X-Men. He was actually correcting some of the information that we gave in a previous shows because we couldn't remember how many mutants were in after the M Day. And actually, this is one question, one personal question that I have for you. I like to start first with you, Lonnie, and with Zac, and then with Zac. How many mutants do you need to create a universe? Because it's kind of interesting because it began with just 5, and then we have a lot. Then Grant Morrison had an entire nation and created mutants here and then. Then we have only 182, and then it's like, well, it doesn't matter how many mutants do you actually have, as long as you are actually using the ones that you care the most in your main story. So, like, for plotting this story, first with you, Lonnie, like, how many characters were you thinking to include, at least as most representative or main characters?
For the whole event, or just for the Marvelous X-Men?
Just for the Marvelous X-Men.
I mean, that's something Zac and I struggled with a lot because this was the first time we were given a team X-Men book, and we wanted to, part of us wanted to take just all of our favorite characters and put them on a team together and just figure it out. But that list was like, 16 different characters, and that would have been completely unwieldy. So we sort of had to go back to the drawing board and figure out who made sense for this team, who made sense for the story, and limit it, because we knew, with only 5 20-page issues, to tell a story with 10 to 15 characters on a team would just be, nobody would be satisfied and nobody would get their minute in the spotlight. So 8 seemed to be a good number that was manageable, but also big enough that we could get some interesting characters on there. And then we just wanted to make sure, like I said, that all of them felt like they were individual parts of the team and part of this big machine. And without any one of them, it would sort of fall apart, and that all of them play very specific roles over the course of the story. For us, it always just goes back to what are we trying to say and what story are we trying to tell, and that usually dictates who we put on the team.
All right, and for you, Zac, and this is actually some of the questions that are coming from the audience right now, from Rodrigo Diaz, and it's about some of the characters that are included in here. And the question is like really simple: is why Jean Grey and Bishop? Why this relationship between these two characters?
We knew this would probably come up at some point.
Oops.
But again, I think it comes down to what was the best thing for the story that we were trying to tell? What was something that you could show that a lot of time has passed, that two characters that you know, in other settings wouldn't have sort of romantic interest in one another. You immediately, when you see that, you understand that this world is very different. You understand that things have happened that you don't have a full context on, and that there's a lot more at stake when you see one of the main X-Men get removed from the board right away. And like, trust me, we want to write the hell out of Bishop because he's one of our favorite characters, and like making sure that he went to another book was one of the harder decisions we had to make. It was tough. I think after writing him in Cable, we were both just like, we love this guy. We want to do everything with him. But to go back to what Lonnie was saying about characters dictating the story kind of dictating the characters that we use, when we originally planned out Age of X-Man, we had upwards of 60 characters that we knew had to go in certain spots, and we had to make very strategic choices about what events led those characters to where they needed to be in order to tell this massive story. And so, I mean, it was the first time ever that we had to create like a big character matrix and do a lot of like math about where people are going and how they're going to get there. And so Jean Grey and Bishop, I know that some of you are unhappy about it, but too bad.
Sure. Deal with it.
Yeah, it's part of the story. If you don't like them, start writing your own story. What's the problem with that, right?
Yeah. Besides, Jean Grey goes around a lot. She's been with Cable, but not Cable, Cyclops, and not Cyclops, with being Madeline Pryor, and not Madeline Pryor with Wolverine. And sometimes someone referred as Professor Xavier being in love with Jean, but he's saying and also, she was underage. No, so it's okay. She goes around.
She has an easy exit because she can say, "Well, that wasn't me. That was the Phoenix Force." So
yeah, she's no Mary Magdalene.
Exactly. And she doesn't have to be. Wookie, we're going with one more question from Daniel Villamil, and after that we have more questions from the audience, in this case from Luis Gallardo. Daniel, where would you?
Yes, well, this is a question from one of our teammates, Zico. In a world full of mutants, how are the X-Men still special?
I think... they're not. I think that's the big thing that we're trying to push, is that their roles change, and they're these idealized versions of what mutants can be. But I think that ultimately in Age of X-Man, it's about their sort of aspirational figures, because they're the ones who lived through a world of hate. They're the ones who fought so hard for everyone to be here and to live this way. And so people look up to them as we would any sort of revolutionary figure who fought for rights and created a new sort of status quo. They're representative of the old world, and they're the paragons of this new world.
All right. We have some other questions from the audience. In this case, this one is coming from Twitter. Luis Gallardo is asking, and I'm going to go for this question with you first, Zac. How is the process of creation of new characters or new mutants, in this case for this specific story? You have already mentioned about the characters that you were picking for here, but in case that you want to create somebody, do you, like, I don't know, go and check for what we already have, or is you just like an idea that I have and I want to introduce this character? What will be the process of these new characters?
I think, again, it comes down to story. It usually, for us, whenever we do create a new character, it's a lot about, like, okay, what specific, like, story are we trying to tell? Who's going to be, like, tragic to embody those themes? And if there's not a character who already exists to occupy that sort of role, and someone that we can put through hell, then we'll create a new person specifically designed to go through that specific hell. So there's some characters that we got to create for Marvelous in the later issues that we got to create, like, 4 new mutants, and sometimes it's just more about like what we want to see and kind of like, you know, the silly things that you can kind of go like, okay, well, you know, if I only get to create X-Men once, what am I going to do? And
specifically
you'll find that
designed.
answer in Marvelous X-Men #4. We created 4 new characters for that issue, and I can't really speak to what they are, who they are, what they do, but they all exist because of different reasons, that like different things that Lonnie and I love, but also, you know, again, they're there because they serve a role in the story, and it's a pretty important role, and it's a role that also builds out the world.
All right, excellent. So we're going back with you, Gilberto. One final round of questions in here, and we're going after that one from Gilberto, one from Daniel, and after that we're going to check with the final question from the audience. So you still have some time. So Gilberto, final question. It can be about here. We didn't mention about another title that I really enjoyed that was previous to here, and where Zac and Lonnie were also talking about different realities, and it was in the Edge of the Spider-Geddon, I believe it was the issue #2, where we had a different version of Penny Parker. And Lonnie, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about how did you relate this version that you were working of Penny Parker, and what were your impression when you saw the version of the animated movie, the latest animated movie with Spider-Man? Were you having in mind your character something like that, or something from your comics, or it was a completely original creation? I don't know.
I mean, the version that's in the film is, you know, for anyone listening or watching who doesn't know, her name is Penny Parker, and she exists in sort of this manga-inspired Spider-Man world, where she operates this mechanized spider suit, very much like Neon Genesis Evangelion or like something out of Pacific Rim. And the version in the comics is different than what they did in the film, but I think the way they did it in the film worked very well for that story, because it needed a Spider-Man who wasn't the same as the other ones, and who offered something completely different. And I think, you know, making her a bit younger and making her suit a bit more of the sort of cutesy Japanese animation as opposed to just like more adult stuff really filled a role that wasn't previously in Spider-Man. So, and for us, the way she sort of behaves is very similar to our comic, and seeing it on screen was, you know, we're one of 2 people to ever write this character. So Gerard Way created her with Jake Wyatt, and then otherwise it's only been Zac and I and our artist Alberto. And it's just crazy to think, you know, that we're some of the only people who ever wrote this character, and there she is on screen in whatever iteration. It was just a really special moment for us.
All right, cool. So Gilberto, we're going with your final question.
Well, actually, it's one kind of a question that you're gonna hate me again, and the second is come from our lost teammate who's not here. I'm gonna start with that question. Nature Girl, really? That's what he said. That's what he asked. Really? Nature Girl, really?
I'm just going to say, I don't have time for anyone who doesn't respect Nature Girl.
There you are.
Well, okay. And secondly, well, first, congratulate you for the great work that you did in the Drex. It's amazing. It's mind-blowing. And the work that Zac is doing in Relay, because I think it's a pretty heavy social stuff. And reading Age of X-Men Alpha, I've noticed that it's a common thread on your kind of the stories that you write. And secondly, Bishop being the only one who remembers. That's the part. This is the part where you hate me. Bishop being the only person who remembers Age of Apocalypse and being in every single one different alternative reality that has been created for X-Men. While you are redacting the first interactions of him and Jean Grey, he seems to remember, and he seems to be aware that he is not in the right reality. And Lonnie is looking at me like, yeah, I hate you. I won't answer that either, but yes, I hate you. Am I right? Is that true? And it's the kind of a story that you are starting this saga with the social relentless of some characters in your stories, and please don't hate me more.
I'll say this: there's reasons that Bishop was removed from play first, and there are many, but I think the biggest thing it comes down to is just setting this up as a response stage of Apocalypse. I think it was important to take the one guy who was so key to figuring out Age of Apocalypse off the table right away, just to show you that we're not fucking around. This is different this time.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Maybe Bishop was starting to figure stuff out, and maybe that's part of the reason he had to go.
He knew too much.
You removed him because he was dating the redhead. You don't fool me.
All right. We're going right now with Daniel Villamil. Final question for our guests.
Yeah, the design of X-Men is after a Jedi, after Jesus Christ. How do you describe him?
I don't even know. I mean, to be fair, a lot of the design was sort of based off of the stuff going on in Uncanny X-Men, and we didn't have any say there. But bringing him into this world, it was sort of because we wanted to feel like a continuation of that. And yeah, he was taking on this sort of messianic role. It was doing that without it being like too Jesus-y, but also him getting back in touch with his shamanistic roots from the stuff that Warren Ellis wrote during the original X-Men series. And in that, he runs into an alternate version of himself that's sort of more, disheveled and more of the earth. And we wanted this version of Nate to reflect that.
Sorry,
Right.
sorry for interrupting. There's a question from one of our patrons, Juan Espiritu. What's the difference between work with established universe like X-Men and do something on your own? There's any kind of restriction, or do you have total control of the story?
I mean, in most scenarios, it's just a set of rules versus no rules, right? Like, I think when you do a creator-owned book, you're in your own sandbox and you kind of have to define the walls around you. And when you're writing a big 2 or sort of licensed properties, the walls are firmly established around you and you know kind of where you can kind of wander. I will say that, like, with Age of X-Man, our editor, Jordan White, and the rest of the X-Men office pretty much gave us free reign, which was something we were not expecting. And they basically said, whatever you want to do, you can do it. Here's all of the X-Men that we have. You guys pick and choose who you want, where they're going to go. And we were just kind of like, both like, oh, did we just slip and hit our heads and go into a coma? Because that's not usually the way it goes. I mean, we've written some other things that, big interconnected universes rely on continuity and people being in different places. And so there's a lot to consider when you're playing in that licensed sandbox that's just different. Creator-owned is scary because there are no rules and you can kind of get lost in your own world very easily.
All right, so there we have it. Thank you very much for the answers that we have in here. Thank you very much for your times, Zac and Lonnie, and of course, Nightboy and Wookie. And especially thanks to all of you who have been watching this show, to our patrons, particularly Rodrigo Diaz and Juan Espiritu, who were present during this transmission. I'm not going to thank Zico because he was supposed to be in here, so go to a different show. However, in case that you have more questions and you want to perhaps ask them directly, don't worry, because you can find them pretty easily in Twitter. And for example, in the case of Zac, they can find you in Zac B. Thompson in Twitter. You can actually see it in there. You will find all the links of the things that he's working in there. And in the case of Lonnie, we can find him also in Twitter right now in Lon_monster, where, just casually, we have the presentation in this case of the covers of some of the titles that we have in here. We will be getting more information about how Colossus lost his arm, Magneto lost his eye, and Storm lost her hair. No, wait, that was just because she shaved it. Okay. And remember, we also have some different recommendations in this case. Lonnie, if they want to read something more about some of the titles that you have worked previously or in the future, some recommendation that you want to give to the audience?
Yeah, we have the collected edition of a book that Zac and I did last year called Come Into Me that comes out at the end of March. And that's a very strange body horror book that is influenced by David Cronenberg and David Lynch, and is sort of our way of looking at the way social media is affecting the way we interact with each other and with technology, but in a very roundabout way. And we're very proud of that series. So that's what I would recommend checking out.
All right.
And it's not as raunchy as the title makes it sound.
That's nice that you actually have to. Well, it's not nice, but thanks for clarifying that. And, that's one of the series that I have been recommending, and this is a shameless plug for me. In Churros y Palomitas, a different show, I had the honor of having Zac and Lonnie to talk about films, about the storytelling, about adaptation of horror, and about these topics. So you can find more information about that. And Zac, in your case, you are actually preparing a different title that is coming soon, right?
Yes, this is The Replacer. It's about a young boy who sees his father suffer from a massive stroke and then believes that his father's been replaced by a demon. It comes out in April from Aftershock, and it is a one-and-done graphic novella. So it's 64 pages. You get the entire story. It's twice the price of a regular issue, but again, 3 times the content. So please support that sort of format, because if you don't support it, we'll never be able to do it again.
That's a good reason to support it. So there you have it, guys. You have actually more story and more quality writing in this case from these authors that we have in here. And with that, we are pretty much finishing this transmission. Once again, Zac, Lonnie, thank you very much for your time. We really had a blast talking with you guys. And hopefully you will join us in a future transmission, guys.
Of course.
For sure.
Yeah.
Thanks very much for having us.
All right, and remember, guys, if you're watching this right at home, there will be audio available tomorrow. I believe that I will be posting it in the regular podcast channel. And you can also support us. We have a Patreon page in patreon.com/D-Strip-Ando, where you can find different ways to support us. You can send us money. You can send us Coke. I mean, like regular Coke. Don't think in different kind of components. And we accept pretty much everything except human sacrifices. Thank you very much for watching this.
Women, send us women.
Send us women.
Send us women.
All right. Thank you, guys. And once again, thanks everybody, and bye.